My name is Bryce. I grew up in Idaho, in southeast Idaho, in a little town called Blackfoot. I currently live in Salt Lake City, but I'm relocating back east to take a research position at a university. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what my last few years have been like. I imagine, or you can probably figure out, we have somewhat of a similar backstory. Small towns, conservative families, shoving every sort of feeling of liking boys deep down into whatever dark abyss you could find. Being afraid that if anyone somehow found out that you'd be bullied mercilessly, or that your family would be rejected from your faith community, or that you'd just disappear. And I had all of those experiences growing up. The last 4 years of my life have had the most significant impact on where I'm at as a human being, as a gay man, and as, just as a person, and the way that I see the world. I went to school at the Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, which was an adventure and a challenge and a source of great frustration for me. Before I went on an LDS mission, I had gone back and forth about whether or not I wanted to stay at BYU, what I wanted to do. When I returned from serving my mission in the Kansas City area, I hated everything about BYU, and I still stayed. Crazy. Doesn't make sense to this day. But I found a home in my studies in sociology, and it was there that I found professors that I could form relationships with and feel comfortable talking about what I was experiencing in my life, in what I then termed my same gender attraction, which is such a clinical, awful, stigmatizing, terrible word. Ugh. But to begin really my coming out process. In fact, the very first people that I came out to were professors in my sociology department at BYU. When I applied for a graduate program at BYU in 2013, I talked about my experiences as a gay man, and at that point I hadn't come out to my family yet. And so I talked about that and how the experiences I was having as a gay man at a religious institution shaped the kind of social worker I wanted to be. A professor made fun of me and said, "You came out to Cecil O. Samuelson before you came out to your parents." Which was true, I did. But Cecil didn't know, so that was fine. The president of BYU at the time. And so I had a home. It was safe. It was a little weird and awkward. And there were so many misadventures there at BYU. As I was starting to explore who I was and try to understand my sexuality. Oh goodness. There were a number of computer labs where I made out with the boy that I was dating on BYU campus. That I chuckle at now every time I go there. And just funny things like that. One professor that I had was a staunch advocate of reparative therapy, and discussed it regularly in her classes, which was frustrating to me. I hated her with a passion. Hated her. And so at one point I discussed homosexuality in one of her classes, for which I got a C+ on a presentation that I'm not at all bitter about. But two of my professors in that program, after that incident, looked at me and said, you never have to take a class from her again. There's a couple of classes that she teaches during the next year, but we'll find you substitute classes, which I appreciated. Okay, yeah, I became an accommodation, but these professors who had a profound impact on my life wanted me to be in a safe learning environment where I could be myself, and they knew that her classroom wasn't going to be one of those. And I think it was a unique experience for me, having that home in sociology and in social work. They're liberal disciplines. In very other few places at BYU would you have that experience. But while I was in school and trying to process through all of the mess that being gay and growing up Mormon and having the crazy family, trying to process all of that, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. There would be days on days on days where I would just be in my office at the university doing nothing, feeling completely alone, feeling like I should do something but not being able to do anything. Before I started graduate school, I attempted suicide twice. I tried to drown myself in my apartment complex pool because I was at this point where disappearing was a whole lot more appealing than having to deal with the feelings of anxiety and worrying that I somehow disappointed my entire faith, family, and God, which is a lot to take on. And so I tried to drown myself twice. But as a child, I was an awful swimmer, and I had this perpetual fear of drowning, which I think my subconscious kicked in and was like, nope, we're not going this way. We are scared to death of this. And that was so frustrating. During that same period, I kept making plan after plan after plan to end my life because it just, it didn't feel worth it to me. And sometimes still there are days like that, but they are a lot fewer and further between. But as I was going through all of this planning and this premeditation of how I was going to die, what I wanted to say in my note, thinking through the implications of it all, I would think my way out of things. One plan was to throw myself off the building that I studied in on campus. And I got to the top of the building one day to sort of evaluate, and I looked down and I was like, this is not a far enough fall. All this will do will maybe severely maim me. And I hated that. I hated analytically thinking my way out of what I wanted to do, out of trying to kill myself. And then one semester in graduate school, I lost it. I had lost all interest in my schooling, in my studies, in family life, in my relationships with other people. And so I attempted to kill myself again. This time, instead of drowning, because that didn't work twice, I tried cutting. The next morning I went to school, wrists covered, everything to make sure that no one could tell. And we started studying borderline personality disorder. And I freaked out because individuals with borderline personality disorder often engage in self-harming behaviors, which I had just done. I was like, I swear, I don't have borderline personality disorder. And so I ran up to my professor, my advisor, and I told him what had happened the night before. And he took me to the hospital, And I spent a week in an inpatient psych unit. And that professor saved my life. And he's a dear friend of mine. A couple of months later, it got to the same point where I was just lost all interest in everything. And again, tried cutting. But the scissors that I was going to use were too dull. And so I spent another 5 days in a psychiatric inpatient unit. At which point I decided that I wanted to live more than have a graduate degree. And so I dropped out of school. I left the city of Provo, and I started working on myself and trying to learn about myself. And the good thing is that I'm in a pretty good place now. I'm happy with who I am. My family is still working on it. They're a work in progress. But I'm happy about who I am. And I'm glad that I had someone that I could talk to when I was in those really dark places, when I wanted to die because I didn't see any other way out. And that was really the best. The last 4 years were hellish, but they were also really good for me. And as crazy as it sounds, I appreciate those years because they taught me about myself. And I think that's what's most important.